All right, so we are going to talk a little bit of neighborhood history, intersection, food culture, and politics. And I am going to take over the screen share here in a moment to look at a series of images here. And Jesus, uh, there you are. You must be in air conditioning right now because you're wearing a sweatshirt. But if you want to walk us through a little bit, this is an image from I think it was 2017 that I
Yes.
took before we actually even met each other. Can you talk a little bit about what we're seeing and how it came to be?
Yeah. So I mean, this is the summer of 2017. I had moved back from New York, and I was, I think I moved back in early, late 2016, and I bought this trailer in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The reason being is I moved back because I wanted to start a business. I was ready to plant my seeds in Milwaukee. I looked at my bank account and I said, what can I really do? And the most viable option for me at the time was buy a trailer, convert it into a kitchen, a mobile kitchen, and just start telling your story through food. So when I bought the trailer, I started looking for location. Walker's Point has always had like a lot of significance to me. The reason being, my parents immigrated in the late 70s. My father used to work at Pfister and Vogel. So this was, First Street was his main route to get to Pfister and Vogel. When my mother was working, she used to work at a factory in Walker's Point, right off of 3rd and Florida, which is now a new development. But at the time, it was like they used to make hats, like wool hats. So they'd always tell us stories of the neighborhood. They met at Guadalupe, which was, I believe it's called Holy Trinity back in when it first opened up. And I believe it's like the second Catholic church that offered Spanish Mass. And that's where they met. So there's a lot of history. I grew up on 17th and Scott, which is not considered Walker's Point, but it's a neighboring neighborhood. So it was part of my story. And if I'm sharing my story through food, it's important that I'm planted there. I reached out to the owner of the lot. We worked out a deal. I was able to be there, and really in that location is really like the entrance to like Milwaukee, Third Ward, downtown. So it's really like you can't avoid it. You're gonna find out what the story is behind Mazorca because we're present. So that's what led me to being there on First in Pittsburgh.
For sure. And it's yeah, I mean, I probably saw you guys within the first week you were there, because I like you just described. I mean, that's an intersection that people are passing through all the time. It's just a really heavily trafficked one. We're gonna move to another image here. So talk us through this kind of thing. I'm gonna share kind of a whole array of images, but this is sort of the evolution of your time in Milwaukee.
Right. I feel like if you don't shy away from telling your story, I think this is the fruit of that. So not being afraid to let people know, my origin story, that led me to be in a position where I can now provide more opportunities for other food entrepreneurs to tell their stories, create this platform. This is an image of Zocalo, the food truck park. We opened up in 2019, in July of 2019. And I mean, our focus with creating this space was, one, we wanted to cultivate relationships with food entrepreneurs. And we really wanted to create an ecosystem that was going to harvest community. And, with the help of my business partner, Sean Phelan, he is a developer. So we started having conversations early on. I mean, after the first summer of being on First in Pittsburgh, we started having conversations about being able to provide spaces for not just me, but for other vendors. I met Sean Phelan, back when I was like 12 years old. He was very much involved in my middle school. And he was a mentor. And I think that's also very important that we understand the value of mentorship in these communities. But, just kind of like staying on topic, this is a space that we're reaching our 1 year anniversary, I believe at the end of this week. But what I'm the most proud of is when people talk about the space, and they just mention how diverse it is and how they don't feel like, they're shocked that they're in Milwaukee experiencing this.
For sure. So I'm just gonna scroll through some images. Ursula or Marcella, do you guys want to? There you are with Lieutenant Governor.
Yes, and then Sean Phelan is my business partner.
Cool.
He's the gentleman in the middle.
What I think is really cool of what you're doing here, and it's kind of a repeat of something that I was involved in, this whole culture of like food production and food manufacturing. It was kind of early 2000 when we started to work on the whole clock shadow development. And, many of you probably know Julie Kaufman, she bought that lot for like $1 a number of years ago prior to that because it was contaminated. And her vision was to create a community-focused facility that would really be radically sustainable in more than just the typical sustainable ways of thinking in terms of energy. She also wanted it to be a really important part of the community of food production. And so through that project, we ended up developing incubator businesses within the Clock Shadow Creamery portion of that business. By including Walker's Point Clinic and Core El Centro and the Healing Center, we were also able to expand that whole community connection to a farm producing rooftop. And it's just kind of interesting of how these things keep on repeating themselves in Walker's Point.
For sure.
Because now it's like, this is now 15, 20 years later that you're doing this kind of development. So I think that's really, really cool.
So when you started this, Jesus, and so Marcella, in 2017, the 5 years prior to 2017, Walker's Point was undergoing like really rapid change with new housing facilities going in. You saw a lot of infill development. You saw repurposing of buildings. And Marcella, a lens that I know you have is that working at Walker's Point Center for the Arts is that of culture and art. Can you talk a little bit about the, kind of what you were seeing through that period of time, and then kind of the role that culture plays within these conversations of neighborhood and change and the potential of gentrification?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think it's just the question of, as we're analyzing the development that's happening, I think for us as folks that are invested in the communities and then maybe have, direct connections to folks that are either being displaced or that are being affected in one way or other, I think it's our responsibility to really acknowledge the harm and damage that can result from decision making that doesn't include, the voices of the community in terms of like what investment is needed, what type of businesses are coming in, and most importantly, like where does the line of money trace back to in terms of that economic empowerment. So when I'm analyzing the impact of, just this development in Walker's Point, I'm definitely seeing folks that usually would not have felt safe. I think part of the conversation, especially with, the lens that we're seeing right now in terms of, police brutality and policing, is really, how are we creating safe communities, and how are we defining, safety, and how is that even, the center topic as investment is happening. So as someone, who, is brown, I think that it's also important for us to realize, I think, when we talk about our role in fighting gentrification, I think it's also important for us as individuals to acknowledge the roles that we play in enabling the type of, gentrification or enabling of systems that are disfranchising, whether it's people from physical space or disenfranchising them from feeling of belonging. So now bringing it back to my role as a director of Walker's Point Center for the Arts, this is an organization that has been in Walker's Point for over 30 years. It's definitely been a gathering place for folks that are very diverse. One could argue that the arts is like one of the ways that folks of different backgrounds, of different socioeconomic status can come together into, you know, common language of analyzing, you know, whatever, you know, is happening in the world through the form of art. So to me, it's really important to really look at how, you know, the center right now in 2020, analyzing, you know, all of these intricate systems that play of power, of, you know, belonging. To me, it has been really important in the leadership in our programming to ensure that we are welcoming to folks, that, you know, that we are being seen as a advocate for, you know, folks that don't necessarily get invited to these conversations of, you know, the businesses that are coming in, of why they're coming in. I think that there's a lot of, you know, criticism around how development happens. And I think that there are some changes in the moving towards positive direction of, you know, actual community inclusion, but there's definitely a long way to go towards that. And I just think that, you know, we're in a very important moment in time to really, you know, ask those critical questions, that it's not just like, oh, thank you so much for coming in, you know, building this and providing jobs. Like, really be critical as, you know, stakeholders in these communities of, you know, what are the types that are being offered, what businesses are coming in, and most importantly, how that's going to leave long-term investment, not just residual, like in the next year or two or the next month, but really long-term investment that I think really complicates, you know, just the whole notion of what investment really means.
Sure.